Hello and welcome to our launch event for FMR 74. It's lovely to have so many of you here already. We're going to wait a few more minutes just to allow a few more people to arrive. And while we do that, if you would like to use the Q&A to tell us where you're joining us from, then as participants, you should be able to do that. We love to hear. We know already that you've registered from all over the world. And so we'd love to just hear where you're joining us from. So you could just pop that in the Q&A while we wait for a few more people to join. Wonderful to see so many of you joining us. We have New York, Egypt, Toronto, Cairo, Nepal, some more from Bangkok, Oxfordshire. That's very exciting. Okay, and we're going to start in just a moment. Okay, well, hello and welcome. It is such a delight to have so many of you from all across the world joining us to launch this issue of Forced Migration Review number 74 on financing displacement response. It has been a wonderful process of putting it together with our fabulous authors over the last year. I'm Alice Phillip. I'm the managing editor of Forced Migration Review. I returned from maternity leave in the summer, so this issue was already underway. And I'm delighted that Emily Arnold Fernandez, who set off this process as managing editor, has now returned to us to be part of the team. And so she'll be presenting later as well. For interpretation, hopefully those of you who are familiar with having interpretation have already found at the bottom the globe. But if you are having any trouble with finding the globe, it's on the bottom panel, and you can then select your language. We've got French, we've got Spanish, and we've got Arabic. So if you would like to put those on, please do. The Q&A is a place where any point during today's event, you can put a question for our panelists who will be sharing in about 20 minutes time. And we will put those questions to them. On behalf of FMR, I would like to thank our many people who have been involved in making this issue a success. From the start, we had our expert advisors, Bahati Kanyamanza, Andira Kara, and Leah Zamor. Our issue sponsors, the Conrad N. Hilton Foundation. We had our reviewers, mentors, and authors, some of whom are with us today. And for this event, we're also delighted to be partnering with ODI Global, who are supporting the event in various ways, including by having a moderator in Caitlin, Caitlin Sturridge, who will be leading our panel in a moment. So without further ado, I will hand over first to Lauren Post-Thomas, who is from the Conrad N. Hilton Foundation, and she'll be giving us some opening comments. Over to you, Lauren.
Thanks so much, Alice. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. And huge thanks and congratulations to the Forced Migration Review team and all of the authors of this issue. It's been truly exciting to see the issue live and authors and others sharing the content across their channels over the past couple of weeks. And I hope that continues. I think, especially for those joining today's event, it's no secret that financing for forced displacement is not fit for purpose, and it hasn't been for quite some time. Not only do rising needs of displaced populations and their host communities far outstrip traditional aid resources, but the model of aid we're implementing was, frankly, built by a small group of people for a very different time and as a Band-Aid response to what are now long-term challenges. Over the last decade, I've taken part in my fair share of calls for a transformation of this humanitarian aid system. And while we've seen some positive changes, for example, the emergence of multilateral development banks as a new source of funding in refugee settings, and especially in the last couple of years, a more actionable movement to funding local and refugee-led organizations, humanitarian donors and actors have largely continued to do much of the same. Of course, change takes time, but we still need more out-of-the-box thinking that can help dismantle many of the current entrenched top-down ways of working, and we need more non-traditional actors to enter from beyond the fray. So the Conrad N. Hilton Foundation was really pleased to support this issue of forced migration review exactly for these reasons. We know how important it is for there to be a space to challenge the system and its financial response to forced displacement. We hope this issue encourages implementers to push their donors to give them space to design and work in more long-term, refugee-led, market-driven, and climate-responsive ways. We hope that in reading these pages, it lights a fire under bilateral governments and multilateral institutions to act on their commitments to prioritize delivering funding more directly to the populations and markets that they seek to serve, to break down their own silos and give partners room to think more creatively. And we hope the private sector finds ideas for them in these pages too. We're creating space for the private sector to follow our lead, hopefully embrace more risk and make big investments. We promise for those of you representing the private sector today, there will be returns. And we're demonstrating really what works. So once again, thank you to the Forced Migration Review team and the authors, and I hope you all enjoy today's panel event. Over to you, Emily.
Thanks so much, Lauren. It's been a delight to work with you and your colleagues and to know that the Conrad N. Hilton Foundation is leading the way in pushing for changes in the conversation and also for changes in practice. So we've been really thrilled to partner with you on this issue. For everyone here today, I'm delighted to share that the issue, FMR 74, Financing Displacement Response, is available online in 4 languages at fmreview.org, which you'll also see in the chat. You can click the link to go look at it. We very much encourage you to read it and to share it with your networks. Our website was recently redesigned. So if you've taken a look at it, if you have looked at it in the past and taken a look at it recently, you'll notice a whole new look and feel. It's still in beta. So we do hope that you will find it much more accessible than the old website. And all of the content is available in multiple languages. But we also know that you might notice a few glitches since we're in beta. So if you do find them, please share them with us. We're in the process of tracking down all the things that still need to be tweaked. And in addition to reading this issue online in 4 languages, you can also find it available in print. So if you are one of the folks who've requested copies or you've asked for copies as a regular practice on our mailing list, those should be arriving soon. The print edition also is available in multiple languages. And if you still want to request print copies, please do let us know. You can do that through the contact section on our website or just by sending an email to FMR, and I'll let my colleague put the email address in the chat. Today's event will also be available online as a video. It will be on the Refugee Studies Center YouTube channel, and we'll be getting it onto our website in due course. So we encourage you to share the video of this event with your networks as well. It's another great way to dive into the content around financing displacement response that's in this issue of Forced Migration Review. This event, we hope, will give a taste of the articles in the issue. As many of you probably already know, the issue explores the implications of shifts in both traditional and new financing approaches and actors, and how these are impacting displacement response. So as you read through the pages of the issue, you'll find topics like Gulf donors funding on gender, impact of Gulf donors funding on gender issues, remittances and community-based crowdfunding as new and historic grassroots approaches, innovative ideas like refugee bonds and refugee lens investing, and also some of the failures or mistakes or lessons that we can learn from recent innovations, the Jordan Compact being one of several that were trials of new approaches and had some benefits, but also yielded some lessons about how we can do better in the future. So you'll see this article sharing all sorts of ideas, thoughts, analyses, lessons, and recommendations. Climate funding to address climate displacement is also included, and that's really just the beginning. So I hope you'll dive into the articles across the issue. But for now, I will turn it over to our moderator, Caitlin Sturridge from ODI Global. We're really delighted to have her here, and she will introduce our panelists and give you a taste of some of the dialogue that we hope this issue will spark.
Thanks, Emily, and thanks to Lauren. I hope you can all hear me clearly and okay. My internet is a little bit shaky in Nairobi today, so let me know if I glitch or if you lose me. So my name is Caitlin Sturridge. I'm a Senior Research Fellow at ODI Global's Humanitarian Policy Group, also known as HPG. I'm thrilled to be moderating this session, and I was thrilled to be asked to moderate it. Financing responses to displacement is something that we at HPG have been thinking about a lot over the last few years, and are set to carry on thinking about it for some while to come. Over the last 2 years, we've been proactively tracking funding to refugee-led organisations and analysing the barriers and obstacles to funders. So this is really a perfect opportunity to hear more about the different funding streams, the different ways of financing displacement response. So without further ado, we'll now turn to the author panel of today's session. On the panel, we have 4 brilliant speakers whose papers all featured in this special issue on financing displacement response. So I'm delighted to introduce Alya Al-Mahdi. Alya is a dedicated humanitarian advocate who currently serves as the Deputy Director of Programmes at St Andrew's Refugee Services, also known as STARS, in Egypt. STARS provides migrants and refugees with legal aid, psychosocial support, medical assistance, and education. Welcome, Alya, to the panel. We also have Aziz Hoque. Aziz is a faculty member at the Centre for Peace and Justice at Brack University. He serves as the advisor for the Refugee Studies Unit in Cox's Bazar. He has pioneered innovative community-based research approaches in fragile contexts, including the Trust Network and WhatsApp Chat Hour. On our panel, we also have Marta Guerrero-Blay. Marta is an advocate for Refugees International, where she focuses on development responses to humanitarian situations. Marta leads relationships with multilateral development institutions and their refugee financing approaches. Welcome to the panel, Marta. And last but certainly by no means least, we have Sara Arapiles. Sara is a postdoctoral fellow at the Faculty of Law of Lund University. She conducts her research within the interdisciplinary project Refugee Finance, Histories, Frameworks and Practices, which is funded by the European Research Council. So now that we've introduced our panelists, we're going to turn to them to hear more about each of their articles. And after that, we'll be opening up to a Q&A session with the audience. I've been told that if you have a question for the panelists as they're speaking, feel free to put it into the Q&A box. And it would be great if you could state your name and your organisation. And also if there is a particular panelist you would like to direct your question to, I'll then be able to read them out for you once the panelists have finished with their introductory interventions. So Alya, I'm going to start with you. In your article, you highlight the important role played by refugee-led organisations like STARS in Egypt. You describe in great detail the ways in which RLOs can be more efficient, more cost-effective, and more sustainable, often much more so than many national and international NGOs. But in spite of these achievements, you also highlighted in your article the significant funding challenges that your organisation faces. Could you tell us about the steps you've taken as an organisation to overcome these funding challenges and the lessons that others in a similar position to you might be able to learn from what you've managed to achieve? Over to you, Alya. Thank you.
Thank you, Kasim, for the question and for the introduction and for the question. Actually, since we're here to discuss refugee-led organizations in general, I believe it's essential to highlight all the possible strategies that RLOs can use to address the funding challenges. So I would start with advocating for inclusive funding criteria. Actually, many donors have requirements that exclude RLOs from accessing essential funding. For example, this includes the need for formal registration, access to bank accounts, and a track record of good financial practices. In addition to that, there is also the language barriers that can hinder RLOs during the funding application process. And we think providing can be a solution to address these challenges. Also, funds are often restricted to specific activities that are maybe not necessarily aligned with the country's needs and confirm with and the knowledge of we think
the line not very clear. It's possibly just me, but I wonder if others are also. I can hear a lot of background noise. I think it might be your phone, actually. I can hear the background noise as you're speaking. Go ahead, and it's in and out a little bit, but go ahead. No. Okay. Why don't we do this? Why don't we come back to you, Alya, in a minute, and we'll switch to the second panelist, and then maybe we can do a kind of a separate test on your audio to see if we can get you back with a clearer message, because I can tell you're saying loads of really interesting things, but I'm struggling to hear you, and I think others on the panel or others on the call are also struggling to hear you clearly. So let's go to Aziz. We actually have a fairly simple question for you. I'm actually just going to. Alya, would you mind muting us? Thank you. Aziz, your article focuses on Bangladesh, and it shines a light on the informal remittances that support many Rohingya refugees in the absence of adequate aid and services. Why do you and your co-authors advocate for refugees to access formal banking systems? What benefit can that bring to refugees operating in Bangladesh? Over to you.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, and thank you, dear audience. During our research, we were conducting this research based on the community-based approach, where we are collecting communities' responses, how they are experiencing. So in this article, we have heard from the community people that what are the benefits this access to formal financial system and also access to banking system would benefits the community people and also to the government of Bangladesh and also the host community. So they are sharing. One of the big benefits that will contribute to the national economy of Bangladesh, because the number of the refugees, they are large, nearly 1 million people. In our previous study, we have found that 39% of the total refugee population of Cox's, they have the relatives or friends or family members across the globe, like in Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, and other countries. So they want to support their family members. However, as there is no formal access to financial systems, so they have to choose different informal ways, and somehow it's the illegal way of financial transactions. So ultimately, this money is not coming to the Bangladesh. Ultimately, the internal money is being circulated. So here, this will, if we ensure formal access to financial system or banking system, so Bangladesh will be benefited from receiving this money. And recently, Bangladesh also facing some scarcity of the reserve system in the national bank, and they are struggling to import some of the essential foods and fuel. Secondly, it will reduce the possible misuse of the money in the illegal way, because if they have seen a legal way of transferring their money. Ultimately, the possibility of cross-border smuggling or misuse of this money for illegal way, it will be stopped because government will have the strong control to oversee and they will see the flow of the money. And it's also very much important for the community perspective because to see a durable solutions, we should empower the community by giving them a chance so where they can exercise their humanitarian principles. And also access to formal system will reduce the cost and other illegal and also the risky ways. However, here in the Bangladesh, there's a big concern among the policymakers and so host community because all the policy are very much short term. One of the focus is immediate repatriation of the refugees, but there's a lots of complexities international level and also in the regional level. So ultimately, the repatriation is not being possible. That's why the refugees are suffering. At the same time, all the short-term policy also creating the barriers in access to some other things. Because one of the common fear among the government of Bangladesh is they will not get any system that will create opportunity where refugees will feel comfort and they will stay here permanently because immediate repatriation is the ultimate goal. So that's why these are the complexities and the fear. One of our suggestion we would like to suggest is why not creating a refugee specific financial framework where we can use alternative options like the digital wallet linked to UNHCR identifications, or we can engage some of the international organizations as a collaborations who will provide the necessary technical and also essential support so that we can ensure a free flow of this smooth transaction at the same time maintaining a very peaceful and also the other necessary things. On the other hand, we are also suggesting that we have to strengthen the legal and the policy framework because proper implementation of the law and the policy also will ensure the systems will be very transparent. So here we think that a national level awareness and international awareness also requires so that we can ensure this access to banking system, also finance system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aziz. That was brilliant. And I love the way in your article you justified the transition to formal banking systems through these different layers, how it benefits the refugees, but also the wider economy and governance structures. I thought it was brilliant. Alya, I can see you're back online and it looks like you might have changed your headphones. So I wonder if we
Yes.
a second go and see if we can hear you better. You were telling us about how your organization has overcome the funding challenges and perhaps what others in this online audience could learn from your successes at STARS. Over to you.
Thank you, Kathleen. I hope you can hear me well now.
Better, thank you.
Great. I was explaining that since we're discussing the RLOs in general, I believe it's essential to highlight all the possible strategies that RLOs can use to address the funding challenges. And I would like to start with the advocating for inclusive funding criteria. Actually, many donors have requirements that exclude RLOs from accessing funding. For example, these include the formal registration and the accessing to bank account, maybe sometimes a track or record of a good financial practices. There are also other language barriers that hindering RLOs throughout the process of applying for fund through the applications and other requirements. And this can be solved by providing some mentorship to the RLOs to help them move through these challenges. Also, funds sometimes restricted to a specific activities that are not aligned with what the community need and what RLOs as experts on the ground see the community need. So advocacy efforts by RLOs have been crucial to encourage donors to revise all these criteria and ensure that RLOs are eligible for funding. And it's important to keep doing the advocacy and find good solutions and helping RLOs to get the fund. The second point actually is promoting the recognition and support of RLOs. RLOs have been advocating to increase recognition and funding specifically allocated to their organizations. For example, STARS, as part of the Resourcing Refugee Leadership Initiative, the RRLI, It's a coalition of 6 global RLOs working to secure direct funding for RLOs and strengthen their capacities. Through the coalition's work, STARS and the extended RLOs related to STARS and globally, they were able to highlight the RLOs offer efforts to the donors, and we're keeping to do that. While this progress is ongoing, I think we need more like efforts to be done to ensure that RLOs are an integral part of the localization efforts for fund. The third part, which is like all of them are leading us to the third part, which is educating donors about the role of RLOs. We work to demonstrate how RLOs serve as a bridge between. We provide clear examples of our impact and the RLOs that we're working with impact on ground. We help donors to understand why supporting RLOs is crucial for an effective displacement response, because they are in the ground, they know more, and they are the expertise about their community, so they can advise us better. While these tips help us also, like all these tips helping us sometimes to address the funding challenges, there is an additional barrier remains, which is the bank accounts, receiving the fund directly from the donors if RLOs get fund. So it's important also to navigate this through intermediaries and partnership with other organizations who can facilitate receiving the fund through them. Overall, we think RLOs are demonstrating their efficiency, effectiveness, and deep community connections, which make them essential partners and important in refugee response effort. And it's important to keep educating the donors and advocating for RLOs to empower them in general. Thank you so much, Kathleen.
Thanks, Alya. That was perfectly clear, and it was great to hear firsthand some of your reflections from STARS. I was in Cairo, as you know, about a month ago, and was at your offices and was blown away by the work that you do. It's really amazing. So congrats. I'm going to turn to you now. We've heard experience and Egypt, and we're now going to take a step back with a more global focus by focusing on a specific donor, the World Bank, which was the focus of your specific article. In your article, you wrote about the bank's important role in funding the displacement response, but you also highlighted the need for better collaboration, better coordination, and better dialogue. I was hoping you could give us some specific examples of how the World Bank could further strengthen its investments and its impact in displacement settings. Over to you.
Thank you, Caitlin, and thank you to all the panelists, because this is a very rich and interesting discussion. And now we're going to talk about MDBs, or multilateral development banks, and I want to start highlighting the scale and the importance of this financing, because the World Bank in particular is becoming one of the most prominent actors in funding the refugee response globally. In fact, they are emerging as the 4th largest provider of concessional finance behind the United States, the European Union, and Germany. So the role that this institution will play in shaping the way host governments and the world responds to refugee situations is going to be so important. So therefore, we must ensure that the financing is not only effective, but has a tangible impact on the lives of refugees, and that it does improve the response overall and long term. But to start to think about how the World Bank funds and how we can improve it, we need to understand what type of projects the World Bank funds and how the institution works. Because being a development institution, it works different from the traditional humanitarian schemes or the organizations that typically work in refugee situations. So the role of the World Bank financing has 2 main goals. One of them is to strengthen host countries' capacity to address refugee crisis. And the second one is to promote the inclusion of refugees in country systems. This means that they will fund projects to expand access to maybe public health systems, public education systems, or even like social security systems to refugees, but they can also strengthen institutions like improving the national refugee system to provide access to regularization or access to work. So they do work directly with host governments. And the role that host governments have as the receivers of this concessional finance is that they not only identify what are the areas they want to invest in, but they are the main decision makers of this funding. They carry out the funding, they receive it, and they also implement it. So this is great, right? You have a lot of host country leadership within like this World Bank financing, but this also can create some issues when it comes at selecting what types of projects are being funded by this mass financing that the World Bank has. And one of the most important risks is that the funding in some occasions might not always align in investments that are aligned with the most important needs of the ground. And sometimes the investments might have a marginal impact on the lives of refugees. So there is this risk of like, are we funding the right thing? Are we funding the things that refugees actually need? And is the impact actually effective, or is it marginal? Like if you're building a road with this financing, is the road leading to the location where refugees live, or you're just building a road to build a road? So in a way, that's kind of like, how do you ensure that this very specific refugee financing does make a change for the life of refugees? And one of the ways that we discuss in the report is through increased dialogue and collaboration with humanitarian actors, but in particular with refugees themselves. And is what Alya was saying before. Refugees know their needs and their situation better than anyone else. They're experts on their own right, and some of them are also, experts working in this space and having their organizations taking leadership and participating in these like policy dialogues and implementation of programs. So it's very important that as we define the priorities for investments and we create these country strategies and provide funding to ensure that we change the way countries respond to refugee situations, that refugees are active participants of these discussions from the get-go. So there's two aspects when it comes to World Bank financing in host countries and how to improve it, which is the humanitarian development nexus and the challenges. And one of the things that we are starting to think is like, how do we improve it, right? Like, it can be so easy as starting conversations, like transparent discussions. When I talk to humanitarians in many of the countries that the World Bank finances, they haven't heard that the World Bank maybe provides funding to those nations. They don't know what projects they're funding. They don't even know what the World Bank does, right? So, starting from the get-go of like, can the World Bank proactively reach out to not only humanitarian organizations, but RLOs and refugee leaders to really establish a transparent conversation on like, hey, this is what we have, this is the financing we have, this is what we are trying to do. And when they define the priorities for investment and when they are trying to identify what are the needs, they do consult with these organizations. And second of all, like we really think, and I know I'm at time, so I'm gonna shorten it up, like this aspect of transparency, reaching out, and they do have also assessments where they are trying to identify, are the projects working or are the projects not working? And in these assessments, it's important that they continue this continuous dialogue, especially with RLOs and refugees on the ground, in a way that they can not only identify and influence the areas of investment, but make sure that these investments are being applied and implemented effectively on the ground. But, we can continue this conversation in the Q&A as well.
Thanks, Marta. I know you had a lot more to say, so I'm sorry to have to cut you short, but I want to leave enough time for Sara and for the Q&A. So, Sara, we've heard about a specific funder, the World Bank, and I want to hear from you about a specific funding mechanism in the form of refugee bonds. In your article, you describe how these represent a paradigm shift from public sector funding to private financing. I'm not that familiar with refugee bonds, if I'm totally honest with the audience. So I was hoping you could give us a bit more of an insight about what these look like in practical terms, to introduce them to the audience, but also maybe get on to some of the pros and cons that you see of these kinds of market-led approaches. Over to you.
Thank you so much for your questions. So to start with, a social impact bond is an outcome-based model of financing used to address social issues, which means that a specific outcome, which will be stipulated in a contract, has to be reached. And the outcome may differ from bond to bond. So for instance, it may be entrepreneurship or integration into the labor market. The outcome in the Koto bond, which is actually the one that we studied for our contribution to the forced migration review, was actually integration into the Finnish labor market. So this bond was issued by the Finnish government, and its aim was to provide language and vocational training for refugees in Finland to enable labor market access. So the training offered to refugees was linked to key shortages in the Finnish job market. And the impact of the Koto bond was tracked through the beneficiaries' identification numbers. The taxes paid by the people who actually access the labor market were then reinvested in the system. So the remuneration of the investor depends on whether the outcome stipulated in the contract is reached within a specific period of time. And once the outcome stipulated in the contract is reached, the bond matures. And upon the bond's maturity, the investor will get the return on investment. The type of investors may also differ from bond to bond. They can be individuals, but also, for instance, pension funds, by selecting the option of sustainable investment. You also asked me about pros and cons. So we think that it's still early to evaluate fully the pros and cons of the financial instruments aimed at refugees. Having said that, one of the positive aspects that we can already identify is that there is more flexibility and availability of money, which in turn allows for a more rapid response to refugees. So the money is given upfront to the refugee service providers and humanitarian organizations, which means that they will have capital in advance to provide for refugee services. As has been already discussed in the event, traditional development aid and funding from a state is not longer available. And that's why there is a willingness by humanitarian organizations to engage with the private sector to be able to continue with their projects and the services that they provide for refugees. So governments or state authorities attract private investment, and this creates a cooperation between the state and the private actors, which allows states to mobilize private funding to provide refugee services without having to allocate money themselves in advance. But the other side of the coin is that we don't know the long-term implications of these financial instruments yet. A potential adverse impact is the fact that these financial instruments may have implications on international protection and its legal understanding or conceptualization. These financial instruments do not focus on the needs of refugees fleeing persecution, but instead of the needs of refugees in accessing, for instance, the labor market, as it was the case of the Koto bond in Finland. And of course, accessing the labor market is something positive for refugees, but providing services only to those who are able to access the labor market prioritize a specific type of refugees, but left out others, including the most vulnerable ones out. And we have to see this in the context of the increasing emergence of European policies of deterrence, which of course raises some broader concerns. And as part of our project, which is an ERC-funded project on refugee finance, we'll also be looking at the implications of these financial instruments on the ground through an empirical study of these instruments in Europe and also in Colombia. So please stay tuned. Due to time constraints and to allow for our discussions, I will stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sara.